you have family in Gaza, and I wanted to ask, what is going on? How are they, and how, and maybe what was life like before this, and what is life like right now?
Yeah, I mean, trying to do your job as a journalist while also knowing that there's a very real chance that your family um, could become the story is gut wrenching. This has been a really really tough week. I have cousins, uncles, aunts in Gaza. I was born there. I actually lived there for a small part of my childhood. It was funny. We were doing I was translating some footage that came in yesterday from a hospital in Gaza, and of a doctor who, as he's treating patients, notices that some of them are his son and his father are there, are amongst the dead. And as I'm translating, I check and I realize that was the hospital I was born in. So, and I guess it's hard to put into words sometimes the depth of the dehumanization that has happened over the last 10 days towards Palestinians. I mean, we were, I guess we were teenagers in 9/11.
Yeah, I mean,
And we remember,
I was 18.
yeah, and we remember very distinctly, how scary the times were after that. The bloodlust that a lot of people had, and at one level you understand people are scared, they're angry, they're shocked, they want someone to pay for their pain. But on another, when we're talking about some of the most powerful militaries in the world against some of the most defenseless people in the world, there's only one way this is going to go. The way the media in this country and in Europe especially have reported on this over the last 10 days has been terrifying, because what they did, I mean, the logical conclusion of what they were doing or what they've been doing is what we saw in Chicago, right? You spoke about the man who killed Wadia being, poisoned by right-wing talk radio. Unfortunately, that's only a few degrees of extremism removed from what we're seeing on mainstream media from some of the most respectable journalists and faces in this country. The utter dehumanization of Palestinians, the utter deference to everything that the Israeli government and the Israeli military have said, despite their decades of on the record atrocities. The Israeli government has open fascists in it, people who have campaigned and won election on ethnically cleansing Palestinians from what remains of their land. And these are the people that the mainstream media in this country have been very uncritically platforming. We've seen Israeli soldiers on CNN primetime say, this is not a war against Hamas, this is a war against all the civilians, with zero pushback from some of CNN's most high-profile anchors.
And just to double down on that, it's not just that one IDF soldier who's like in full regalia. I mean, just like so performative, disgusting, and I'm not going to play it, but that's exactly what he said. I mean, he is literally correcting the anchor and saying, no, we're talking about all civilians. It's not just Hamas.
Yep.
That's not just from him. We're talking about the president of Israel also saying we're openly targeting civilians. This is the same thing. We do not distinguish between Hamas and civilians. When they're so bald-faced, I mean, let's just name that then this morning, and I don't know if this is the hospital you were born in, but the Al-Ahli Arabi Baptist Hospital was bombed. 500 people confirmed dead. And I mean, there were just days ago, you see there's babies in incubators there, man. They're just, there's doctors are trying to keep them alive. And so these are war crimes, out and out war crimes. Does that surprise you? Number one, Safin, does that surprise you? And like, what is it going to take when you see that they're just celebrating that? I mean, speaking of celebrating, right? They're celebrating that this is what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's disgusting, because in the immediate aftermath of the bombing of the hospital, that wasn't the hospital I was born in.
Okay.
But that hospital, like all the other hospitals in Gaza, there's two things about that. Since day one of this Israeli war, the Israeli military has been very open about the fact that it intends to target these hospitals. Multiple doctors and hospital officials have spoken about repeatedly, not in the US media, unfortunately, but repeatedly. You see it in Arab media, you see it elsewhere, about getting calls from Israeli military and intelligence officials saying you need to evacuate the hospital. There's been a big storyline that's been happening, that's been playing out, I suppose, outside the mainstream media. But the threat of this has been real.
Mhm.
Doctors have said over and over, we cannot evacuate hospitals. We can't leave people to die. You can't evacuate a hospital. It's impossible. There are patients, there are people in surgery, there are babies in incubators, there are the wounded, and there's nowhere for them to go. As we saw a couple of days ago, the road that the Israelis said was safe for evacuation was bombed. The Rafah crossing has been repeatedly bombed. The other thing about the hospitals is, because in the past, where even though Israel has bombed hospitals in the past, the bombing has tended to be minor in comparison to some of the airstrikes in other areas.
Mhm.
These are literally the only places in Gaza that people felt they might be safe, right? Thousands of people are gathered in the courtyard of every hospital. The killing, the deaths that we're seeing, and the pictures are absolutely indescribably grotesque. The pictures that we're seeing coming from the hospital are of children, their bodies torn apart in the courtyard of the hospital.
Yeah.
Right. Aside from the horror of this atrocity, what it also does is reinforces psychologically this terror that there is absolutely nowhere you or your children are going to be safe.
Yeah.
You and I are parents, and I cannot imagine trying to comfort my kids and trying to reassure them that they're going to be safe in a moment like this.
I mean, this is the other thing we were talking about, mainstream news. Why is it that we have to turn to social media to see these images? I mean, I would say that some news outlets, mainstream news outlets, obviously AJ Plus is doing an incredible job. I think New York Times has done some, despite their fluff pieces about Jews who feel unsafe versus actual kids who are being murdered. They have done some on the ground reporting, but you're not seeing. It's like there's just this dissonance, right? And it kind of plays into the idea. I mean, in terms of censorship, you've got it right there, right? Because if there were these images, I mean, coming out of Israel, right? They'll show blood, they'll show where people were dragged by Hamas. Like, that's totally fine to air.
Yeah.
But on the other side, we're seeing again that fog and that sanitization of war, of like, let's just get the officer to tell us how they're strategically killing people in hospitals. So it doesn't surprise you that they would do this, but I guess I'm just like, we're like, no one can say they were ignorant.
No, I mean, I don't know if I would say I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I think this probably was the last thing that could have shocked me in Gaza, and it has. I think the last couple of hours since the news broke, it's been very hard to process it. And Francesca, I've covered this story for years. I've covered the 2008 war. Sorry, I was around for the 2008-2009 war. I've covered the 2014 war. That was one of the first major stories we did at AJ Plus. Right. The 2021 war, and this has been absolutely orders of magnitude more horrifying than any of those. I mean, in 2014, the Israelis killed 2,200 people, 550 of them children, over a period of 55 days. We have almost doubled that number in just 8 days. And the reason I think the Israelis have done that, and we have to be very clear about accountability here, is that they have been given, primarily by the United States, but also by other European powers, a blank check to do so.
Yep.
When President Biden and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Antony Blinken repeatedly affirm that they have Israel's back, that Israel will do what it needs to do, and we're going to be there for Israel no matter what. And if they have to do this, then so be it. And then put out a tepid statement afterwards saying, we told them to respect civilian lives. You're telling these people that they can do what they want. And we, as the most powerful country in the world and the prime patron of Israel's military machine, will sit back and do nothing except reload the ammunition that you've already dropped over Gaza. It's words. I mean, we grew up seeing images, say, from Eastern Europe, the Balkans War, Bosnia, Rwanda, and people say we didn't know. Well, we're watching it in 4K live.
No, and you know who knew more than anyone else is the Biden administration. They've known. Of course they know what's going to happen. They could have put out that tepid statement, and you're making a reference to the fact that yesterday Joe Biden said, hey, all civilians aren't Hamas. Hamas aren't all civilians. Cool. Thanks, my guy.
Yeah.
Could have used this like a week and a half ago, or a week ago or whatnot. It just feels like it's been a lifetime since this all kicked off. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do